Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to what is now our fourth NatWest in partnership with TiE Live Interviews. First of all, I just want to say a huge thank you for all the feedback that we received from the first 3 weeks. We've been absolutely delighted with the insight that's been provided, the interviews, the lineup that we've arranged for viewers, and the feedback. Please keep sending that in because we want to help and support and really continue to do events like this digitally for the time being. So for those of you know me, my name is Dale Sibleton. I'm one of the NatWest Regional Directors for Entrepreneurship. And for those that are new to the broadcast, then absolutely welcome and we're delighted to have you here. So this is week 4, and after the first 3 weeks, like I said, we've been blown away by the standard of interview and the interest and the questions and the general learnings that we've had already, and this week is going to be absolutely no different because we've got another fantastic guest lined up for you all. I think first of all, as things start to change, as the world starts to reshape, post-COVID, NatWest we're working really hard to provide programs of support for business owners, for entrepreneurs, whatever journey you are at. So whether you're a brand new startup, whether you're just thinking of starting your business, or whether you've been through growth and scale, and actually these times are really like no other. So we are working really hard. Do visit our NatWest.com website and look at all the support tools that we've got. And sessions like today just add to that, and we want to do absolutely more. So thank you for your feedback. I know you're going to enjoy session 4. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to our host as always, Vikas.
Hi everyone, welcome to this week's Tea and Talk. So today we're really honoured to be joined by Mark Adlestone, who's an entrepreneur and philanthropist. He's the chairman of Beaverbrooks the Jewellers, one of the most prominent names on Britain's high streets. He joined the company in 1979, became the MD in 1990, and the sole MD in 2000 before becoming chairman in 2012. Under his leadership, Beaverbrooks has gone from strength to strength, winning a ton of awards and pioneering not just communication and company culture, but giving. And we'll talk about that more today. The company's got a really strong emphasis on charity, and about 20% of its retained profits go to the non-profit sector each year. The company exposes all of its colleagues to this part of its values through charitable involvement and volunteering, and gives every single colleague 16 hours per year of paid time to work for the charity of their choice. And since the year 2000, the Beaverbrooks Charitable Trust has donated more than £15 million to over 750 charities. In 2015, Mark was presented with an OBE by Her Majesty the Queen at Buckingham Palace for services to business and charity in the north of England. And in 2017, was appointed as Deputy Lieutenant of Greater Manchester. More recently, in 2018, he was granted the Legend of Industry Award by Variety and was appointed High Sheriff of Greater Manchester in 2019. And as of last week, we now sit together as trustees of Mustard Tree, which is the largest charity in the north of England, supporting people who've been marginalised through poverty. So without further ado, welcome, Mark, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. It's great to be with you, Vikas.
So I guess, let's start with the elephant in the room, which is affecting all of us, coronavirus. So, for you and, for your businesses, when did you first see that coronavirus was going to be a problem for business here? And how did you start by responding?
I think I personally think I was a bit late in recognizing the impact it might have. I think I was looking at other countries thinking, well, that's not going to happen here. I think I was in a bit of denial, to be honest. And I remember having a conversation with my MD, Anna Blackburn, probably about 5 or 6 days before we actually closed down on the 23rd of March. And she was saying, Mark, we're going to have to close our stores. And this was before the government actually recommended that we should. And I actually was in shock. I couldn't quite believe it. We made a decision to close down about a couple of days later. So we'd already made our decision to close on the same day, funnily enough, as the Prime Minister mandated us to do. So we were already, I suppose, in that regard, a little bit ahead of the curve. We'd already put plans in place. What really hit us hard was when we closed our online business. So we closed our online business on the 27th of March. And the reason we did wasn't because the business wasn't there. It was the opposite. We were too busy. There was too much business, and we couldn't cope safely with that whole 2-meter thing. And it just hit us, completely hit us. We were ill prepared for it. And we closed down. And I guess for the first 7 days of that, we were probably grieving a bit and feeling sorry for it. We then pulled ourselves together and found a solution to reorganize our warehouse to make it appropriate and safe, or super safe actually, because we like to think we go beyond perhaps what others do. And so we reopened 19 days later, and I'm sort of very pleased to say that that business has been really strong. So our online business has been really strong,
And how, for a business, all of us have got different stakeholders in our businesses, whether it's investors or the bank, whoever it may be. But, for a business at your scale, how does that play out? How do you have that conversation with stakeholders to get that certainty before you then communicate with your colleagues and the wider customer base?
Well, I think we're in a slightly unusual position. We're a family business. And what I have been doing over the last few years is buying in the shareholdings of those non-involved family members who were shareholders but were not actually involved in the business. So we've got a very, very, very tight number of stakeholders. So that wasn't actually difficult. And frankly, it was really about talking to our colleagues internally. The bank is a different.
And I think,
question. We can talk about that separately if you like.
I think that would be really relevant because it's something which I think every single business right now will be facing that conversation with their bank. So yes, if you'd be happy to, it'd be great to get your experiences.
So as part of that process of buying back the shares, we took a loan facility. As it happens, NatWest is our bank, and we've been working with our relationship manager, Brian Devlin, who's been particularly supportive. But then, in addition to that, and pre-COVID-19, when we still wished to do it, purchase a couple of Rolex agencies, which is quite expensive. And given the fact that we'd only just, paid out a significant amount of money, cash, to family members, then this opportunity came along. We needed the bank to support us. And they were very supportive pre-COVID, and I'm pleased to say they're equally supportive. Post.
And as for the, we'll come in a moment to, the crux of our discussion around philanthropy and engaging in the community. But before we do, just to get your views on the future of the high street, because I think it's something which everyone's thinking about, which is after this, we all know that we're not going to go back to life quite as we remember it. But what do you think will be the future of our high streets?
Hard to say, but I think there's a pattern that's emerging, and I guess it's been exaggerated and speeded up over these last 3 months to more going online. About 22% of our business was previously online, and I suspect that's going to jump to probably closer to 32% the year that we're coming into. Partly because we were closed in our stores for 3 months, but actually it might even be higher than that. It might even be 35%. So what does that mean? It means that we're going to be looking even more closely at each individual store to make sure that they return a profit. And, we have closed 4 stores in the last 15 months, but we've also opened 3 stores as well. So we still see opportunities. We opened in Rushden Lakes near Northampton, and we opened 2 Omega boutiques. We have one in the Trafford Centre, but we've also opened in the Metro Centre and in Stratford down in London at the Olympic Village. So where there are opportunities, we're still going for them. You might have thought that the smaller towns would suffer, but what we're finding is we're working with the landlords to try and find, when we come to the end of our leases, and our leases are shorter by design, to give us that flexibility. And the landlords are working with us. So
Yeah.
We can find that in places like Stockport and Oldham and Bolton, for example, and Wigan, we can actually find a profitable model. It's not just the Trafford Centre stores. So I don't know what's going to happen long term. I hope that we can retain representation in those types of places going forward.
I think one of the really fascinating things about your business in particular is it further proves the point that people often make, which is, you know, there's often this consideration that there's certain products that people just won't buy online. But, you know, even something like luxury jewelry and watches, people are still very prepared to buy them online, even though the traditional business model was around that in-store experience.
Watches doesn't really surprise me because it's a commodity. You know, watches are a commodity and they're easily identifiable. What really surprises me is when people buy diamond rings online.
Oh, wow.
Because it's not so identifiable. And, you know, we're very keen to offer a great customer experience when people come to buy an engagement ring. It's a really important particularly as a couple. Now we're still replicating that through a Perspex screen at the moment. But yeah, it's the percentage of our business online of diamonds is pretty similar to our percentage in the stores, which actually, you know, I can't get my head around that, but it is a fact.
Oh, wow. Well, and also I think when we first met, you were giving a talk about, you know, an astonishing part of your business, which, you know, I admit until that point, I wasn't aware of, but, you know, under your leadership, Beaverbrooks has made, you know, really serious strides to integrate philanthropy and community right into the heart of what you do. And you were one of the first businesses to really move away from that kind of profit at all costs motive, which was the kind of modus operandi of so many organizations, to realize that there's much, much more responsibility you have. It'd be great just if you could talk us through that early journey of how you introduced this into the business and why.
It's an iterative process. It wasn't, or maybe it was. I mean, there was one moment I can actually, or two moments I can probably think about. And I think it comes down to considering the purpose that we're here for. Now, the obvious purpose is to make money. So I guess everybody listening to this podcast will be thinking, yeah, well, that's what we're here to do.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, you know, we start asking the more sort of interesting questions around why and what do we do, and what do we do with that money once we've actually earned it, and can we change the world around us? And I'm very conscious of the fact that, you know, we live in an ecosystem. We're all interdependent, and so if we are successful financially, if we make a profit, I'm really, really keen to think about how we use that, how we share that with our colleagues, and actually how we deal with our suppliers. What sort of relationships do we have with our suppliers and our communities? It's really important, and of course our customers. We have an internal slogan. It's a purpose. We call it Enriching Lives. So the purpose of Beaverbrooks is to enrich the lives of the people around us, and those people are our colleagues, our customers, our suppliers, the way that we deal with them, and our communities. And that's sort of driven right through, that's in the DNA now of our organization. Now, there were a couple of significant factors, I think, that got me to that point. I read a very interesting book that was influential to me by a guy called James O'Neill, and it was called Leading Change. And it was all about values-based leadership. So that the individual had to be, as a leader, you had to be values-based, and you have to be authentic, but also the big question of the why and so what. Yeah. And that's when I realized that actually we can make a difference to the world around us by bringing our people with us. Yeah. Because there's no doubt that our people, our colleagues, feel very connected to that purpose and very proud of the work that we're doing as an organization, but also the fact that we're enabling them to also do that work. And that's really powerful.
Wow. And,
please, sorry. and the second point was, where did the 20% come from of retained profits? Well, that's come from I was in I don't know what you'd call it. It's called a shiur in Hebrew. It's a learning session with a rabbi, and he was talking to us about the imperative to give of yourself.
Yeah.
And the imperative is to give a minimum of 10% of our net income up to a maximum of 20%. So we were already doing quite a bit. We were doing around the 10%. And that's when I decided with my partner at the time that we needed to increase that to 20% of, I call it retained profits. So that's after any dividends, that's after payments of profit share.
Yeah.
So all of that, and 20% of those retained profits are then put into the Beaverbrooks Charitable Trust for distribution.
Yeah, wow. And I think it's really inspiring that you've done that, and I do hope that lots more businesses follow that. But I think the other thing which I found quite fascinating, particularly in the Beaverbrooks journey, is I think given the length of time you've been doing this, you've also really shown that this isn't just a nice to do. There's a real business case for this kind of giving and this kind of engagement, isn't there?
Yeah, there is, providing you join the dots. And I think I wasn't great at joining the dots. And what I mean by that is I think I was a great role model, but people don't necessarily follow great role models. You have to give them the tools, and you have to break it down, and you have to help them to just because I was doing something myself doesn't mean that my colleagues would necessarily do the same thing. And I think the great ability to join the dots was when my MD, Anna Blackburn, really got stuck into this. When she became initially chief executive, now managing director 6 years ago, and we were having chats together, and I was talking to her about stuff that even she didn't know about that we were doing. She said, Mark, if I don't know we're doing this, how on earth can the rest of our colleagues, 980 colleagues out there? So what she's been really good at doing is encouraging our people to follow that lead. And what we're seeing now is the number of days that are actually being worked. So yes, we do give 2 days per employee of paid time, but not just because we give it, not everybody does it. You have to enable them to do it and give them opportunities and encourage them and give them examples of where they can engage. And the levels of engagement have risen year on year on year on year.
Yeah.
Not because we're insisting that they do it, but because we're inspiring them to do it, and they're inspired themselves to do it. And I think that's the difference. And that's where I needed the help from my MD to help join those dots.
Wow. And I want to kind of come to get your advice for businesses in a moment, but just if you reflect back on that journey, with the foundation and with the charities that you've supported through the business, are there any particular outcomes or particular things that you've been really proud of that you've been able to achieve for the charitable sector through the work you've been able to leverage through the business?
It's a difficult question to answer, Vikas. I think can I answer it in a slightly different way?
Please.
I think my year as High Sheriff has been amazing, because what happened, I finished on the 17th of April. It exposed me to so many different communal organizations across Greater Manchester that I had no idea existed, some of them. Mustard Tree being one of them, actually. And if I didn't have the support of my senior management, my managing director, my senior management team, I wouldn't have been able to have the time. I've made the time to go out and do these things. I'm talking on a personal level now.
Yeah.
And prior to that year, I would say I probably spent 20% of my time on communal activities. Now, during my year as High Sheriff and post High Sheriff, I'd probably say it's around 50%.
Wow.
Half my time is now spent on Beaverbrooks and business, and half my time is spent on communal activities. But I couldn't have done that. I've given myself the gift, the privilege of being able to use what I have as backdrop, Beaverbrooks serves as the platform to allow me to do those things, both in terms of my time, my expertise, and the money that comes from the Beaverbrooks Charitable Trust.
Wow.
So I guess part of that then is enabling your senior management team and empowering them to take those areas of responsibilities on. And interestingly, the more I've done that, the more successful we've been. So yeah, it's almost counterintuitive, isn't it? But actually, the more I've stepped back, I haven't stepped back. I've stepped back, but I'm just getting involved in different things and probably more strategically, I would say.
Yeah. And it seemed, again, from my own time working with charitable organizations, and you will have seen this, much more so with your roles, but charities really do need businesses to engage. And it'd be great just to get some of your reflections on actually how businesses can engage with charities and why that matters, because so many businesses think that we're too small to be able to support charities meaningfully, or we'll do it much later when we've got the money or we're bigger. But it seems that any business of any size could and really should engage with the nonprofit sector.
Yeah, I agree. I think that I would encourage your listeners now to really consider about incorporating philanthropy as a core strategic objective within their DNA. Actually, it's not even an objective, because I actually hate that term. I don't even know why I used it. It should be part of what we all do, and we've all got skill. We've all got a skill set. And what I find in the charitable sector is quite often these charities are smaller than the SMEs that we're talking to now, but they're desperately short of the skill set that we all possess. So we can help chief executives in terms of their strategy, in terms of their marketing, in terms of their the way that they engage with the public, and their vision. So I from the experience I've had now over the last X number of years, I feel I could work with any charity, and I feel that quite often the challenges are very similar. So one of the things that I think is important for me going into a charity is to support the chief executive of that organization strategically, but also to help them lose some of the distractions that are around them. And some of those distractions may well even be trustees. Because what we sometimes find in charities is that trustees join organizations in order to improve their CV, and that sometimes ego gets in the way. And that I think it's really important that when we get involved in the charity, we're doing it for the benefit of the charity, not for our own personal benefit. But interestingly, if you do it for those reasons, all the benefits still accrue to you along the way, because it's very enriching.
No, I definitely have seen that from our own engagement too. And I think obviously you've been exposed to so many different non-profit organizations, and particularly in these recent months, how are you seeing the charitable sector impacted by coronavirus? Because we see every single day in the papers that often the charities are those organizations at the front line helping the thousands of people who have been adversely affected by what's been happening.
So we've taken a strategic view within the trustees of the Beaverbrooks Charitable Trust, and you may have seen headlines, because we know that all of those organizations fighting COVID-19, whether that's the NHS, the emergency, the food banks, and those sorts of organizations have been well supported during this crisis. But there's a price to pay for that, because at the same time, people don't seem to be able to juggle all the plates or spin all at the same time. So we see that cancer charities, we see that we see domestic abuse. They've gone careering up, but there's no real focus on that at the moment. Mental health. All of these other charities are being not supported financially to the same extent that they were pre-COVID-19. So we've tried to sort of balance that. And whilst we have supported significantly the emergency appeals and the food banks, we've been very keen to continue to support the organisations to whom we already have an involvement with and a commitment to. So that's the first thing I'd say. Secondly, I'd just like to talk about within the Jewish community, there's been a really interesting dynamic that's just come about as a reaction to the pandemic. Jewish community, like any community, is very varied. So you've got people who represent the progressive left all the way through to the ultra-Orthodox charities who you might see with the black hats and so on. For the first time ever, as a response to the pandemic, everybody has sat around a table because everybody's equally affected. And so what we're trying to do is bottle that now and say, if we can do this during a pandemic, we need to do this when things start to settle down as well. So I think there are some interesting dynamics that are coming out of the pandemic. I wouldn't have wanted to go through it to get to this point, but I think there are some opportunities for us in the charity sector to work and collaborate better together.
Yeah, I agreed. And it's been actually one of the most inspiring things through all of this has been seeing communities come together. And I want to come to Dale in a moment with questions from our audience and a lot of questions that have been pre-submitted as well. But before we do, just coming back to your life as an entrepreneur and as chair of such an incredible organization, what have been some of your key leadership learnings through all of this in terms of how to lead a business through a crisis? Because from speaking to other individuals, I think you've really set the bar very high in terms of how to do that.
So I think we're quite calm, I would say, in looking at a problem head on and being honest about that problem that's affecting us, and looking at the options that we potentially have, and talking to lots of people, listening to people. One of our strengths, I believe, as an organization is we are very good actively listening to what our people have to say. And that's not to say that we make decisions by consensus, but we make informed decisions based on talking to a lot of different stakeholders. And then the key is that we all work together, we collaborate internally as well. Because the other thing that I think Anna's done really well is I'm not saying we worked in silos before within the organization, because we didn't, but she's brought in accountability and she's brought in collaboration. Those are the two words I would say that have significantly improved our performance over the last 6 years. And because we are working together, I mean, Zoom has been really helpful, I have to say. People all over the country. So we have now regular senior manager meetings, the 24 of us, on a Zoom, and we can do it at very short notice. So communication is, as always, is key. Take your people along with you and listen to what they have to say.
Wow, I think that's really important advice. And I think also, the fact that you are a family business means that kind of, family mentality of supporting everyone in the business really transmits through. And that's a really wonderful thing. And so, yes, at that point in the conversation, I'd love to bring in Dale with the questions that we've had submitted and the ones that have come in well in advance of today's call.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you, Vikas, and Mark. Thank you so much. Again, some great insight, advice, knowledge. But yeah, we do have a plethora of questions actually. So the first one is about family business. Is interesting. So how do you make a family business successful? Me and my husband have recently set up, and sometimes we find it quite fractious.
Is that husband and wife fractious? Or
that's husband and wife, yes.
Oh, I don't feel I'm very qualified to answer that one. Gosh. What I was going to say, if I can sort of broaden it a little bit, I honestly think it's really important in family businesses that if you have members of the family who are shareholders but are no longer involved in the active running of the business, that I think you need to have those difficult, honest conversations with them. to say, look, looking at the future of this business, you're no longer involved. Can we come to some sort of agreement on the value of the shares? And I've had those conversations. So I've kept it really tight. I think family businesses, the concept of a family business being able to support an entire family and generations, it is just not feasible. It's just not feasible. And so you have to face that. When I joined the business, there were 5 directors, and we're now 2. My dad being one of them, who's still alive, thank God. I just think you've got to have those difficult conversations. As regard husband and wife, I don't know what to say other than, try and keep it as professional as possible in the workplace, and try and separate when you get home. And that's probably hard at the moment because probably everybody's working from home, but separate business from your family life if it's all possible.
Yeah, I think just one little thing to add, because I know when I got involved in our family business, it was exactly the same. The first thing I had to do was figure out what everyone else would accept for me to buy their shares, but also just to really make sure that you always reflect back and focus on those key metrics in the business. There's lots of really wonderful, enjoyable aspects to entrepreneurship, and there's a lot of buzz around it, but ultimately it's those core things, cash flow, P&L, balance sheet, just the wheels that keep a business ticking over, and make sure that everyone is really razor focused on that, rather than getting too involved in the wider politics that can ensue whether it's a family business or not.
Agreed.
Yeah, no, agreed. Next one that's coming is around customer behaviour. So how are you looking at future customer behaviour and how that will change in the retail sector?
But by customer behaviour, do we mean where customers will choose to buy? Or what does customer behaviour mean?
Yeah, I presume they mean around customer behaviour, online versus retail, face-to-face.
Well, if it's online versus face-to-face, I think I've covered that already, Dale.
What was that? Sorry, Mark?
I think I've already covered that. I was saying that, we'll look at each individual store, and that I think more and more is going to go online, and I think each individual store is going to have to pay for itself. I think we will see, I think there will be always a place for the bricks and mortar, but I think progressively more will go online, and we have to offer that seamless, those options seamlessly, whether it's from mobile, from an iPad, from a laptop, or whether it's online or a mixture of both. And people still phone us up. Would you believe? People still phone us up. So they could be online, but then they make a phone call, or we offer them that option, or they might do it by text or email, or to ask questions, or they may, there's all sorts of different ways. People will do click and collect. So, we could send it to their home, but they choose to pick it up from a store. Why is that? I don't know. But whatever the reason, and however people choose to buy, we will be there for them.
Excellent, thank you. Question around diversity. So great to hear that you have women leading the business. Do you actively look for diversity in your leadership team?
We've actually had a very interesting conversation around that because of Black Lives Matter, which is very topical at the moment. And our marketing team were keen for us to put a black square up on our social media site. And Anna actually spoke to them to try and give a broader context around that. And we felt that would not be a helpful thing to do. We felt that what we needed to do was have a more holistic approach to this, and a more considered approach. So it's very much on our agenda. I noticed that John Lewis had been criticised for not being diverse enough, which is quite interesting when they've got a black female chairperson, and yet they're still not considered diverse enough. As far as women are concerned, we're very diverse. As far as BAME is concerned, the senior management team, we're not. So I think we've got a lot of work to do yet, and we need to talk to and we will be talking and holding focus groups, probably September onwards. We're going to ask for volunteers. Ordinarily with focus groups, we would just choose those groups, but we don't want to make assumptions that just because somebody is Black or Asian or Muslim or whatever, that they would necessarily want to be there for that reason. I think that's a bit patronizing as well. So we're going to ask for volunteers, and we're going to respond to it in a properly thought through and considered way, and we're not going to virtue signal.
Excellent, thank you. A question around the high street. So how do you think we can get more and more people back into the high street?
I think you're seeing a little bit of a renaissance of the more local shopping centres. You know, as I said, the Burnleys, the Bolton, sorry, the Burnley, we're not in Burnley, the likes of Bolton and Stockport and Wigan and Huddersfield and the like. I think it's sort of happening a little bit. I don't know what the magic formula is. I know that Altrincham, for example, was supposedly the retail, you know, town of the country last year, or retail town of the year. And I just thought that was I thought that was a bit disingenuous, frankly. I think Altrincham's done a brilliant job of opening restaurants and the market, the food market. It's a beautiful place to be, but I wouldn't go shopping there particularly. It's only going to be niche stuff. So I think we have to be very clear on what we're talking about. And I think the dynamic shopping centres, the likes of Trafford, will continue to grow. I'm sorry if that, you know, isn't what people want to hear, but I think that's the reality.
Yeah, okay. No, I appreciate your honesty. Got a question that's come in, which was one around, if you could rewind your entrepreneurial journey, what advice would you give to your former self?
I've actually enjoyed the journey, and it's almost like if somebody said to me now, you know, I could foretell where you're going to be in 20 years' time, and where your business is going to be in 20 years' time. Would I want to know? No, I wouldn't actually, because I want to enjoy the journey. So I think it's good to make mistakes. I think, you know, would I have done things differently? Potentially, possibly, but I would just say enjoy the journey, enjoy what you do. Be happy doing what you do. And remember this, there is no destination. There's no final destination. You have to enjoy the journey.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You know, I think that's really, really, really important. Probably a question that feeds into that. So how as an entrepreneur do I balance my work life stroke home life better?
Okay, so if my wife, Gabrielle, she would tell you that I don't do it very well, and I would take issue with her over that, because I actually think I do. I think I do better than she thinks I do. so there you go. And you know, in my case, I've got my business, I've got my communal work, I've got myself. I like sport. I play sport. I'm, you know, in the pre-COVID days, I'd be very keen to go to concerts and theatre and things like that. And then time for myself and time for my family. So I think you need self-awareness and recognize when you have the balance wrong, and everybody will get it wrong at certain times. So if you've got that self-awareness, and there will be times when you just can't avoid it, and that's okay. But if you find yourself constantly in that situation, then that's not okay. Then you have to take a step back and say, okay, what has to give? Maybe I need to give more autonomy to my senior managers, or my managers around me. Maybe I'm taking on too much myself. But if you're constantly battling against time and you don't have time for yourself, then you have to take a good hard look. You've got to step back and ask those difficult questions. And by all means, you know, talk to your partner about that, and talk to your colleagues about it as well, because they will have an insight into what you're doing and how you could perhaps do things differently. So I think you have to really be kind to yourself and work strategically on yourself.
There's I think with that one as well, And it's something that oftentimes you learn it the hard way, but you've kind of got to remember why you're doing it in the first place, because, business is a bit of a drug. It can become a bit of an obsession because creating stuff is fun. And, even in the challenge, it's a rush. But ultimately, you've got to realize that there is far more to life, and you have to be able to separate what you do from who you are, because it can be incredibly challenging if you don't, especially if things go wrong and something happens to the business.
So I would like to build on that, Vikas. If we are all building up a business to sell it off, to make a lot of money, so that eventually we can do what we want to do at the age of 55 or 60 or whenever that is, but we haven't enjoyed the journey, then what's the point? And actually, what are you going to do? I actually went into a retirement session because some of our guys were actually retiring, and the very first question that the guy asked was, so what are you going to do with what are you going to do when you retire? And I said, oh, it's great, we're going to have free time, it's going to be brilliant. And he said, yeah, great, super. What are you going to do with that free time? Well, we're going to play golf, and we're going to go on a boat, or we're going to get in a caravan. He said, okay, yeah, and talk me through the year. What are you going to do after you've done that? And in the end, when you really start to think about it, we need purpose. We need purpose. So the idea of working hard to earn a lot of money to retire, I think is a really flawed way of looking at it. Enjoy yourself along the way. And if you love your work, it should be part of what you do, but also give yourself that time to enjoy other things along the way as well.
Excellent, Mark. Thank you so much. We're probably coming to the end there. So, thank you so much insight from everyone, myself and everyone at NatWest. Vikas, I'll hand back to you just to give what's coming up and wrap up. Great.
Well, I just want to first of all thank Mark on behalf of everybody for taking such a lot of time out with us this evening. So, thank you so much, Mark, for that. And thank you everybody for joining and tuning in to listen to these conversations, because they're keeping me going, and I'm sure they're keeping everyone else going during these quite uncertain times. And next week, we'll be joined by another friend of mine, Dinesh Dumija. So Dinesh founded eBookers, one of the largest online travel companies, which is simultaneously floated on London and New York Stock Exchange. He too is deeply involved in philanthropy and is also a venture investor. And so we're going to learn a lot from him about his journey next week. So thanks everyone for joining. Thank you once again, Mark, and we look forward to seeing you again next week.
Okay.
Bye for now.
Bye, everybody.